Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Aspen New Voices first podcast series. My name is Taha Sabri, and I'm a doctor working in public mental health in Pakistan. The theme of our first series is Voices of Resilience, and in this series, we hope to capture the inspirational stories of the Aspen New Voices Fellows who have been dealing and successfully overcoming adversity in their lives and careers. I'm very thankful to the Aspen New Voices program for helping us initiate this series, and I'm deeply honored to be given the opportunity to co host this series with Rene Sparks, who will introduce herself in a bit. Um, we are very pleased to invite our first guest, Miss Roseline Orwa from Kenya, who is a New Voices Fellows from the class of 2021. Rosalind is a human rights activist working on the issue of widow rights in Kenya. In Kenya, women who have lost their spouses face extremely difficult circumstances. And Rosalind has been able to uplift more than 10,000 widows through her organization, Rona Foundation. And I'll let her speak more about it. Over to you, Rene.
Thank you so much, Taha. And just welcome to everyone. And as Taha has just mentioned, it's the first of a series of podcasts. We're super excited to share with everyone. This is our offering. My name is Rene Sparks. I'm a senior Aspen fellow as well. I'm based in Cape Town, South Africa. My background is in nursing, and I work supporting our National Department of Health, but I also support many civil society organizations with a keen interest in key and vulnerable populations, GBV, SRHR. And I am super excited to be the one welcoming our first speaker, our first guest, which is the phenomenal Roseline Orwa. Roseline, thank you so much for your time, and I really hope this is going to be a wonderful experience. I know every time we meet it is, but yeah, I hope that people will feel the connection to you and actually be able to reach out, even if it is virtually at this point. Over to you.
Thank you, Rene. Thank you for having me, Taha. My name is Roseline Orwa. I am a storyteller. I am a widow and a widow champion, a founder of Rona Foundation, working with the rural widows in Kenya. And I'm glad to be here. I'm also a senior fellow with the Aspen New Voices, and we belong to the same cohort. It's a pleasure to be hosted by a team of colleagues.
Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you, Rene. So, Rosalind, we go to our first question. So about Rona Foundation. So can you talk a bit about what does it do and what kind of approach does it take?
Thank Taha. Rona Foundation largely is a widow human rights organization working with the rural widows in Western Kenya and largely in Kenya and perhaps in the region as in the advocacy space. What our work is centered on is creating safe spaces for minority women left out of formal and informal systems of governance and structures, and women that need to be included in those spaces. And widows are one of those minority women. What we do with our work is we create spaces where women can find their voices back. And that means the use of storytelling, creating a safe space where they can share their experiences, and then turn those experiences into advocacy tools. Like we have in our county a widows charter that we are pushing for policy. Those are widow stories turned into a policy tool. We also largely do what I call impactful and transformative programs. If a widow doesn't have a house, we go and build that house. If a child doesn't have shoes, we buy those shoes and give that child. Our work largely puts the human in the humanitarian, because at the tail end of all this philanthropy, after the tail end of all this talk, it is the human in need at the tail end. So our work simply listens to stories, meets the needs of those stories in a transformative and impactful way by just using and listening to their stories.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And if I may, I was just thinking as you were speaking, I was wondering, I mean, anyone who's listening to this, and I think I've even seen it in the past, engaging with you people, the first question that comes to mind is why widows? Why not all women? Why are we championing for women's rights, for widows' rights, if I can put it that way?
I'm a widow myself. My husband was died in the post-election violence in 2008 in Kenya. And I came to face with the realities of what widows go through. And largely what is just left to sit with the widow alone at home, to sit with the widow with her children. So we are looking at a category of women that largely live, a large percentage live with HIV and now are surviving a second pandemic, the COVID-19. A percentage of women that were left at the tire of their grassroots communities, bearing the burden of care, orphan care, elderly care, food security, all the things that family-headed households. Now she's the widow-headed household, that she has to bear that burden, but she also has to fight harmful traditional practices, traditions that sort of cage the woman, sort of make the woman, diminish the humanity and dignity of the woman. So that is why there's a special interest for me. And largely because I am a widow, I am the story. I know what I experienced, and that experience that I experienced became multiplied. And so many other women that came on board as I begin to speak about my own experience. Then I realized it was not only my story, and that is 13 years ago. I realized that was not only my story. It was a story of all these women that did not have their voices back and did not have the space to even speak about their experiences. Because it is one thing to say you are impacting your community, but also for me, what is really important, do we create the space for those communities to engage? And so my work is centered on that. Those engagements is what I carry along to perhaps speak of in different platforms, to speak of in different spaces that will bring resources, will bring policy, will meet their needs, and so that those needs are met how they envision them, not how I even envision them. And that is why I'm interested in the widow story. I am telling my own story as a widow.
That's
Thank
beautiful.
you so much. That is powerful, right?
That's really powerful. Thank you, Roseline. And but another aspect of the work, which I personally experience, is sometimes I experience some self-doubt in the work that I'm doing. That is, what I'm doing the right thing to do? Are my methods correct? So Roseline, do you sort of experience those kind of feelings sometimes as well? And if you do, then how do you deal with them? How do you not let them impede your work, or do they even improve the work you're doing? So
what a perfect question. Do I doubt myself? I am in doubt all the time. Generally, a person who's really self-aware of my limitations, of my Blackness, of my Africanness, and of my identity. Because when you speak about widowhood, we are also looking at vulnerability that is often stigmatized. So I'm always more self-aware than anybody else in the room, that the moment I will say, I'm Roseline Orwa, I am a widow, what will I elicit? Will I elicit sympathy? Will I elicit rejection? Or will I get ostracized by just mentioning that? And two, when I say the target group that I support and work with, what will the double come with it? What will come double? So there's also rejection of self and the rejection of the target group. And that I have experienced either in local spaces or in global spaces, or even in spaces that you think are caring. So when you've lived in stigma, Taha, all your life, divorced at 28 for childlessness, my mother had to return dowry, widowed at 32 at post-election violence, fought cervical cancer at 35. You live in a space where you can recognize stigma and discrimination 10 feet away, and that brings self-doubt. But how do I overcome that? In many instances, I never went into a room without my own music. I always brought my own music. So even if the tone of the room changed, my inside has never changed. And maybe that comes from a practice of prayerfulness, if you may, a practice of yoga of sorts, being self-centered in who I am and who I had become, and also being sure that if the widows that I work with, 10,000 of them and a large number across my country are not present in the room, I am the one here to speak for them. So it does not matter what the room tells me. What matters is what they told me that needs to be stayed here. And then I never went into any room alone. Even with all my doubts, I went with all the widows before me, my mother included, and I went with the ones sitting with me in that moment that are absent, that whose stories and voices I keep hearing, and that centers me. And I'm greatly prayerful, really. I go back to myself all the time to renew who I am and maybe to listen to the invisible power, what in my way I call God.
That's beautiful. That's good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You so much.
Thank you for sharing that, Roseline. I think it's a beautiful way into my next question, which was really about challenges. And I mean, you've actually mentioned a few, but I'm just thinking, is there any particular challenge that you faced that you'd like to share as an example? I'm thinking in terms of anyone else who's watching this and thinking about, you mentioned now, you know, you're walking in with Blackness, you're walking in with being a woman, you're walking into a space that, I mean, culturally and maybe within your country context, you know already you're walking in with all of this baggage or all of these extra barriers, if I can put it that way. But are there any specific challenges that you can share that you've maybe overcome? I know, having spoken to you before, you speak a lot about strategy, and I think I'm kind of alluding to that. Like, are there any strategies that you could maybe give to any other woman listening, or to any other activist really, that they could use when they are facing a challenge similar to what you might share with us?
Rene, that's a good question. Challenges are enormous. One of the challenges that my organization has faced over the years is underfunding. So that is one challenge. The other challenge is getting my voice included, because we belong to spaces, especially global spaces, where knowledge has to come in a certain color, in a certain way. You know, I use storytelling as a tool for change. But my grandmother was a storyteller. My own mother was a storyteller, in fact, a better one than me, full of quotes, wisdom, sayings. And so these tools had already been used before. I am only, in fact, myself, Roseline, I am sitting on a borrowed platform from the funders who support our work, from Aspen Institute, who's given us this knowledge, from the widows that I work with, who's given me their stories and given me my voice back. And above all, from God, who gave me the faithful stories of my life to come into the space and try to speak up. And so those become challenges. But for me, I also turn them into a platform. I have never been shy of standing in the light of my own truth, even if the carpet is dragged under my feet, because I know that truth never dies, it will live on. I've also got to make what I call compassionate compromises. That when is it too much, and when is it about negotiation and accepting that the status quo may not change. So I go into the room self-aware of all those things. And I say, now here I am standing in time, and time is stopping with me. What will change if I didn't say anything? What will change if I just shut up and shied away? Or what will something change if I open my mouth and I say, how about this? And also, can you see it this way? Can you see it my way? What are you not seeing? And also, I'm willing to learn, share, and receive. And that is something I enjoy too.
Thank you so much. I think I love the fact that you brought the aspect of you actually standing on the shoulders of giants, right? There have been those who have kind of laid the groundwork and still do the work. So thank you very much for bringing that.
Thank you, Roseline, for that. And field is very challenging, and I'm sure you faced all sorts of resistances from your community, from global, local, different actors, and I'm sure all of this, hearing all of these stories, and even your own experience, it must take a big emotional toll. It must be, and activism itself is such a challenging experience for all of us. So, what would you advise? How do you deal with the emotional toll of your work?
We don't belong to ourselves. We belong to a higher being, the one who created, the one who sent, the one who gave vision, the one who gave purpose. And for me, that is something that I revere. That is something that I hold divine. That is something that, and I also love, especially when I work with large crowds and I live in a community full of children with a school running, an hospital running, a center that serves about 1,000 widows each week. So there's always a crowd of people around me. But I go into stillness all the time. At the end of the day, in the beginning of the morning, I go into stillness, I go into myself, because the answers are within, the answers are not outside. And so even if the environment is noisy, you can still be inside in a crowded space. And I've always said, even to other young women that are trying to find organization, and I'm supporting a number of them, Juliet, Amboi, that are also trying to start their own NGOs. I mentor them and I tell them, this work is painful. Going to work, especially within your community, is like punishing yourself to be punished. That is why there's an invisible hand holding you together. You will not do it on your own, because the people you are also supporting can also be very abusive to you. There is always over expectations, managing community attitudes and behavior. The needs are overwhelming. The space and resources are also very thin and very small. And so at some point you got to make your walls wider and your boundaries even wider, and grow your boundaries to be taller. Because at some point you have to safeguard and protect yourself. You know, we in this week we were discussing how do you retire? How do you then retire when all the time you have to feed, you have to clothe, you have to fend for people, you have to build houses, you have to provide resources, you have a team to pay. How do you plan your retirement in that space? And so that gives a lot of respect for people who put unrestricted fund. Then you're able to even set pension funds for your team and for yourself. You are able to even get health cover, so that you have that leeway to also be human, because you're also human in the humanitarian. You're just the face of it, but you're not it, because no one person can solve the global problems alone. And we are also held by 1 million other hands that are also cheering us on, supporting us, holding us, praying for us, sitting with us. And so for me, I have a team of prayer warriors, and they may not give monetary resources, but what they give is even more valuable than money. It is that prayer that centers me at the end of the day. And that is how I survive in the space.
That's lovely. Thank you. And so much resonates with me as well. The stillness, the developing the ability to be at peace in the middle of chaos. And that is a skill which is so important in the work that we do. Thank you, Roseline. Over to you, Rene.
Thank you. I thought that was actually quite amazing. I also just wanted to add, because you've actually given us skills that other activists could use, ways that we could think differently about finding that little space, because I was going to ask about self-care, but you've kind of addressed that as well.
And I think kudos to you, Roseline, like to make local issue globally relevant is so tough, and you've sort of achieved that. So, and can you sort of talk a bit about how you did that? How can, and for other activists as well, that we're all facing our local challenges, right? But of course, for change to happen, we need visibility of those problems and investment of resources in those problems, and that happens when we can sort of connect our local experiences to the global stage. So how did you do? How did you do that? How did you connect your particular local issue to the global stage? So can you talk a bit about that?
I think is also an act of grace, largely is an act of grace that connects you to one person and one person to another, and being authentic and being resilient and being consistent and being persistent and being trusted that when you say something repeatedly for many, many years, people become to get accustomed to it, but the right people also get to listen to it. Because Taha, problems are local. World problems are local, environmental problems are local, health problems are local, education problems are local. And so for me, when we empower widow leaders, over 200 of them in Kenya, and call them into a leadership workshop, give them tools, and I try to mutate and replicate myself through them, I am solving a local problem, getting widows in leadership. So when we build a school, we are also solving problems locally. When we build a health center, when we bring communities of different diversity to our center and say, here is us, know us as humans, do not know us with our painful stories, know how we have survived these two pandemics, know how our lives we have rebuilt back. Then we are also showing the world, aligning our issues with the world. And that is one of the tools. By building a network of friends, what we call friends of Rona, teams of friends who also become fundraisers and open spaces. And so, and one tool only, Taha, I only had my story to use. I had nothing. I had never had, I self-funded this organization for 7 years from the dues of my late husband and from my own personal savings and from any other resources and property that I had to sell to run this organization. Until 3 years ago, my organization had no funding at all, but we kept on being resilient. We kept on tilling the land. We kept on telling our story. We kept on using media spaces. And the digital space became a free online space, a free innovation space to speak, to fundraise, and to challenge the norms that we felt were affecting and diminishing our dignity and rights. And so would I say it is something that happened organically? Could be, but absolutely no, because it took a lot of work. It took a lot of pain to build friends. It took a lot of pain to build friendships. It took a lot of pain to join advocacy spaces and global networks. It took a lot of pain and trust and mistrust to break those barriers that exclude women from being included on the table. And sometimes it took us creating our own table so that we get excluded in the main table. And so it's a lot of strategies and a lot of tactics is what I call fundraising to fundraise and fundraising to get included. When you have a network of people who know the right people, then you will get to join. And that is how I got to join the Global Advocacy on Widow Rights at the UN. And we spoke at the UN General Assembly, UN Security Meeting, European Parliament in Brussels, different commission status of women. And I only had one tool, which was my voice. My voice doesn't need funding, a glass of water perhaps, but I only had my story. I am a widow, and I work with 10,000 widows in my community, and we feel excluded, and we go through harmful traditional practices, and we want to be heard. And could we interrogate? Is it possible to outlaw? Is it possible to criminalize? And we had a tool, a team of experts, of lawyers in my community also came together alongside me and said, all these painful widow stories, we've had them for years. Can we develop what we call a tool? And we developed a widow's charter. And then therefore I had a charter. And I would say, all this I'm saying, here is the proof of it. And so proof of evidence of your work. Here is what we have done around it. And by the time we produced that widow's charter at the UN General Assembly, including my personal story, that is what changed the game. You have to build tools around you that will make sure that doors open, but you are also not talking only the problem. You are also talking the solution, because a lot of champions only state the problem, but they do not provide the solution. But if you look at our work, we go back to say, but even while that is going on, we have built 100 widow houses in our villages. No widow is living in a grass-thatched house. No child is failing to go to school. No person is falling sick and not going to hospital. We are solving our problems locally our way, but please hear us. Here is the issue, but here is also the policy tool. Let's work together. Let's change this in these times so that no woman will lose her rights and dignity because she lost her husband. So that has been the tactic and the strategy that we've used up to now.
Sounds great. Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you. And I think that especially the tactics regarding sort of the networking and ensuring you have the right people, and that is critical in the work that we do. So thank you for talking about that. Over to you, Rene.
Thank you so much, Rosalind, for what you've just shared with us now. I just have one more question for you, and that's really about what support would you need to enhance the work you're doing, other than that glass of water that you were speaking about. I mean, you've spoken about all the work you've had to do to actually get where you are, but surely if there's anyone out there who's going to be watching or listening to this podcast, what is it that they could do that could enhance the work you're currently doing?
Wow, that's a good question. But it also depends on how other change makers answer it. It is very easy for an African fellow in the Aspen Institute to say, I need funding, but that also will elicit space that Africans are always just coming into the space to look for money. But that is the truth. And for me, how I look at my work is that I just need to be in the right space at the right time. I need the right network. I need the right platform. I need the right associations. And thank you for giving me this platform. I need to include my voice, because my voice is that one unique minority women voices are in Africa that perhaps do not get the space to speak their truth. And so I am very careful to answer questions of what do you need in certain spaces, because when I say my truth, it will also mean that the stereotype of how Africans come alongside me, our poverty present, how do people see me? How do I reflect? Am I always the one just bearing the begging bowl? So it's a question that I become edgy on how I want to answer it. But for me, what I would ask is a support system of friends who would enlarge the table to include me, even if including me means a little bit of their lights getting dimmed. Because for me, that is how I work. I extend the table, I create a safe space, I create a platform, and I enable other widows to shine. I enable other widows to tell their story. I enable other widows to heal and thrive, and I enable other widows to speak their truth, so that there is one person in the room that could perhaps hold their hand and say, how can we do it? What can be made better? Because there are knowledgeable humans out there who are looking for spaces to innovate, to research, to do data, and to do interventions that are impactful and transformative. And for me, those are the friends I want to align with.
Thank you so much, Rosalind. I think when you were speaking now, it echoed, someone had said in this week, I'd heard someone saying, I am you and you are me. And I somehow am hearing that in what you're saying. It's like, come to the table and let's have a conversation, and then maybe you'll see how you can help me, instead of me saying this one thing. And I absolutely hear you. When we start off by saying money, many doors close and many people stop listening. So you're absolutely right. And I think it's a brilliant way of framing it. Give the space at the table, and then we can have the conversation. That's great. That's great advice to any activist out there and any advocate out there. So thank you so much. Taha, over to you.
Yeah, and so I think in closing, Rosalind, we would like you to quickly, and just in like a few sentences, what are some key sort of messages you would like to give to other activists fighting similar battles? So from the top of your head, some parting words of wisdom from the great Roseline Orwa.
Oh my God, Taha. My mother was more wiser than me, and she would say, we come together and we invite people to our homestead to sit and talk, not because we have enough, but because we have enough courage and we have enough resilience and we have enough stories to share. It's not that our plate is full, but it's because our words are so deep and so ingrained at the soul of our heart that perhaps you will carry one word away. And that perhaps is what carries me. And that is perhaps the space the New Voices Fellowship in Aspen offered me so that I could sit with a table of people whose plates are full of words of wisdom, that they could eat in mine and I could eat in theirs. And that offering is an offering that I leave open to humans that also want to eat in the plate of wisdom, because we come together, not because we have enough, but we have enough courage, enough resilience, enough words that we can share to change the world. One person, one doer, one change maker, one individual at a time. And I leave that invitation with you. And thank you for having me.
That was lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Roseline. And thank you to our guests who have been viewing this podcast. We would like to thank Aspen New Voices for taking this initiative. And of course, I would thank my co-host, Rene, for doing all the hard work while I just talk on screen. And thank you once again, Roseline, for coming. And till next time for our next podcast or next guest, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much. Bye.